afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the final town hall, or what we believe will be the final town hall for 2021. Can I begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we're meeting today? And I want to do so to start. I'm on Kumameri land today, and while out of respect, I'm not going to mention the name of the elder who passed away on the weekend. I do want to pay my respects to him. He was the co-chair of our Council of Elders. He was the elder in residence at Griffith. He was a really quite extraordinary man. He gave a lot to so many Griffith staff and students. He welcomed so many of us onto his country and helped us to understand it. The funeral that will be organised by his family will take place on Friday week, and we will fly the Griffith flags at half-mast in acknowledgement of the great contribution that he made to our university. And the Pro-Vice Chancellor Indigenous is also working with the family on a memorial service that will be held in mid-December that will acknowledge his many contributions to Griffith. And, I know many of you will want to be involved in that because this was a man who touched many lives. All right, well, thank you. Today we've got quite a bit to get through, as ever. Got a few follow-up questions from the last meeting from the NTU who just wanted some clarification that we didn't get to those questions, and I think it's fair to come back and have a look at them. I want to give you an update on the employee engagement survey actions and some of the things we're doing there. Quickly go over some of the vaccination material. You will have received an email this morning. I hope some of you have had a chance to read it. We know because we've got about 500 responses already, but some of you might not yet, and it's another chance to engage. And just very quickly have a very quick look at the year in review, because there's been a lot of good along with a lot of difficult things. So the NTU wanted to make sure that I answered a few questions about the bonus and the day off that we announced in the last session. And they had a number of, I think, very, very reasonable questions that they wanted to have answered, and I know some of you will be wondering about them too. And you can see those questions up there. So, saying, all right, there's an ex gratia payment, a payment of bonus. Why didn't we forecast that in the R2S process in 2020? And probably related to that, why then did we ask staff to vote on the variation to the enterprise agreement? And then following on, might there not have been, even if not worrying about all those things, if we have got a positive financial position, shouldn't we have used it to employ more staff rather than to reward existing staff? So there are a couple of elements to this. One of them was predictable. When we undertook the restructuring last year, of course, we put ourselves in a better financial position going forward. We thought a more stable position, a position that meant we were able to say there'd be no redundancies this year. So that was predicted and planned for. But there have been a couple of elements that weren't predicted and weren't planned for, but that have meant that we've had a better than expected financial position this year. Though, as I'll show you in a moment, it's only a one-off better than predicted position, which is why we're not sort of just going ahead and spending the money on lots of new people. Three key elements here. One quite significant one is because we used voluntary early retirements and other voluntary deeds and so forth, as well as the more structured restructuring last year, we had many more people exit the university than we needed. So we were a couple of hundred positions down. Now, it just took longer than we expected. The job market was better than we expected. It was harder for people to move across state boundaries and international boundaries. So it's taken a lot longer to start replacing those people. And we're getting there now. We should be in a pretty good position early next year, but it did take more time. Now, of course, while those people weren't employed, that was an additional saving that we didn't expect that we made. And we are conscious of the fact that that's placed a burden on other staff, and we feel, well, they should share some of that financial benefit rather than just absorbing it back. The second element was we did underspend in terms of both the strategy and the operational expenses. And again, it was the fact that things were a bit more closed than we expected. We thought people would be able to travel more, and we budgeted for that they'd be able to be a bit more in the way of events and conferences and so forth. We budgeted a bit more for that. And because people have been just so busy and tired, we've probably done less on the strategic front than we were going to, because there's only so much change that people can absorb. So they're the two big areas. Our investments have also done quite well this year. Sometimes they bounce up, sometimes they bounce down, depending on the stock market. When they go down, we don't rush off and sack a whole bunch of people. When they go up, we don't rush off and hire a whole bunch of people, just because in some ways they're paper based. You don't want to get respond to those too quickly. And we did actually do a little bit better in retaining students. So our revenue is a bit better than we expected, but not a lot. So it's mainly been one-off savings that we only expect to be in place for this year. So we didn't predict all of those. We predicted the major savings. We didn't predict those on top. And we then had an issue, and it's a fair issue to ask a question about, should we spend these on positions, some extra positions, or should we reward the staff who've been picking up the extra work? We can just go to the next slide. We'd be pretty concerned about putting that one-off additional amount of money into ongoing positions, and that's because the underlying financial position is looking weak. We probably at most have been able to, with the one-off money that we gave to people, depending on exactly what level people were hired at, we might have been able to employ maybe 15 or 20 people for a 3-year period on that money. And that would be something, that would be a good thing. But I don't think it would be a game changer, and particularly compared to perhaps allowing our thousands of staff who've been employed here to have a bit of extra money and time. You can see in this slide international student load, and the next two slides just show you why we were concerned about the underlying financial health. In 2019, we had what we'll call 100% student load, our highest student load internationally. And we don't look like getting back to that until 2025. You can see in that was in 2019. In 2020, you can see we have a diminishing in the number of students who are commencing. Our continuing student load actually stays pretty good, pretty robust, and well done to everybody for that. But of course, you remember the borders shut in stages, shutting out Chinese students first and then from some other parts of the world, and then totally shut. So during that time, a lot of our international intake did come in for T1. There were people in the pipeline, English language, people in year 12 and so forth. So we certainly saw a drop in commencing numbers of international students, but it wasn't catastrophic. But look at this year. It's just headed straight downwards in terms of commencing students. Now that's been covered up a bit, as you can see from the chart, by the continuing load staying strong, but as you'll see next year, lots of those students graduate, that drops off a cliff as well. And that is going to take some years to rebuild. The federal government has been making some really positive noises recently and made some actually terrific moves for us. I'm finally starting to feel a little bit optimistic, but there's a long way to go here. So if we have a look at the next slide, you'll see that we're still expecting the red line, our expenditure line, for the next few years to be higher than the green line, which is the amount of revenue that we expect to bring in. Now, by making a bigger saving and a surplus this year, and we will make a surplus this year, quite a healthy one, we hope to be able to ride out those couple of years without going through, horrible R2S restructure sort of things again. So that's why we've actually tried to make this year financially robust, because we knew the next couple of years would be the hardest. Now, if the gates are open wide in January and February next year and international students flood in large numbers and our budgetary situation changes and starts looking like it's going to be changed on a more long-term basis, excellent. No one's going to be happier than me about that. And if that happens, of course, we'll look at our budget again and we'll look at how many people we can afford to hire. But we're not running out hiring heaps of new people at the moment, because we do need to be careful about the long-term financial future. So I agree with the NTU. It was a call that we debated about for some time, but we decided, look, we had thousands of staff who had really put in effort above and beyond. We wanted to give all of them a direct reward. And this was the best way we could think of doing that. A relatively small number of ongoing positions would have really helped in a few places with a bit of workload, but we didn't think would have the same impact. All right, let's go to the next issue now, which is the employee engagement and the survey, the actions that have come out of that. So the survey results gave us a number of areas in which we should improve, which is good. You will have been having meetings with your head of school or director in different areas to talk through your own area, and many of them reflected the broader university, but some of them might have been outliers in different ways. Some things going well there that aren't going well at the whole university, or badly there that are going well elsewhere. So we're asking each of those areas to come up with just a small number, 1, 2, at absolute most 3 things that they're going to work and you're going to work on in your area. And also to start floating up to us ideas for what we might be better doing at a whole of university or at a group or a broader level. At the moment, we're looking at a few areas that we're going to focus on. I want to share some ideas with you today and give you an opportunity to give us a bit of feedback about whether we might be heading in the right direction with those. Now, the first one might be a bit surprising because it's respect, health and safety. We came out really well on that in the survey. Lots of staff were very positive about the way we protected health and safety at the university, and that's great. And you normally wouldn't then put a lot of attention to this. But I'm actually not satisfied at where we are. And I'm also very conscious that we're going to have to maintain high standards next year. Next year is going to be challenging. We are going to have COVID in the community. We're going to talk about a vaccine mandate as one, but only one response to that. So we're really going to have to take active measures to mitigate the health risks that we're going to have more fulsomely in Queensland than we've ever had before. While bullying and a lack of respect didn't show up as a key issue for us compared to other universities and other industries, I'm still not happy with where we are there. You know, we should be doing really well on this, and we're not doing really well on this. And there are about a dozen areas around the university that are really not doing at all well on this. So we're looking to do two things. One is a university-wide set of actions to try and increase respectful behaviours, the ways that we interact with one another, help people to understand what to do if they are in situations where they feel that they're being bullied. And then we will also be taking, and in fact in some cases we've already started to take more direct action to try and deal with issues that are arising in particular parts of the university and to understand them. And finally, internal auditing processes and some issues that have arisen have really shown that we need to do better in at least some high-risk areas. And I have to say there are areas of the university that are absolutely outstanding at dealing with this, but there are some issues arising in labs and sometimes in other areas where there's equipment that needs to be used. And I'm just putting everybody on notice. The senior leadership, we're holding ourselves to account for this. We're going to be doing more executive walkthroughs. We're going to really ramp up our health and safety. But health and safety is on everyone. If you're supervising a PhD or an honours student class in a laboratory environment, health and safety is on you for them. If you're in a lab situation, whether you're the most senior or the most junior person and you're seeing something dangerous, something wrong, you know, we've got to call that out. We've all got to look after our own safety and the safety of others. So that's our first area of focus. The second one, and this was one where we did badly really right across the university, was on career opportunities. So that was a recurrent theme in terms of what people tick the box on. But when you look at the qualitative comments that came back, they were a bit more mixed. So different people meant different things about career opportunities. I think one of the difficulties is that for some people saying, well, I need to be able to be promoted, you know, basically doing the same job in the same area, or at very least I need to be able to be promoted in exactly the same area doing the same type of job, maybe a step up. That's always going to be a bit difficult. You get to a point where there are only so many jobs. There are, you know, 6 Q5s in a team and 1 Q6, and at some point the Q6 position will become available, but not at any predictable point, and at that point there might be a bunch of people who would like to have that position. So one of the things we need to work on is helping supervisors to have good career conversations, and that are a little bit broader than just thinking about, you know, what are the opportunities here in this narrow part of the university? What are the opportunities more generally in this group, this area, the whole university? And sometimes, indeed, helping people prepare for careers beyond the university, or at least beyond the university for a point in time. Linked in with that, but we don't want it to only be about the review process. Make sure that the annual review process has a real and consistent focus on professional development and career opportunities. We had a lot of feedback about how good Griffith Gigs was, and we did want to try and set something up again to make transparency all the opportunities, both for ongoing roles and secondments at Griffith, so that people can see what's going on there. That's mainly for professional staff. And we're going to have a look at the staff who've been on rolling contracts or substantial casual or sessional roles for a period of time. That's a little bit up in the air, but probably talking sort of 3 or 4 years in time. As you might know, we went through the process with the Fair Work Act recently with amendments there to look at casuals and sessionals. That act really wasn't well designed for universities, and Griffith, like most other universities, really only offered a handful of opportunities, and only half of those were taken up to go into a more permanent role. I think we actually need to do something that's designed for Griffith and for those staff in Griffith to have a look at, you know, where we might be able to do. That doesn't mean in every case we will be able to do something, but I think it means we need to have a look at that seriously and using our own lens. The next area was learning and development, and again, this was an area we didn't do well at across the university, but it is absolutely great to see staff eager to have opportunities to learn more, to develop, to enhance their careers, and we want that to occur too. So there were a couple of areas that particularly showed up. Early and mid-career, I've said researchers, but early and mid-career academics, and in some ways the people who are most stressed and had the most difficulty there were people who are trying to balance the teaching and research loads. So an initial bit of focus there. We're working on leadership development programs as well. We do have a number at the moment and some of them are really good, but helping to make sure people are prepared for the roles that they're in and coming up to. That's not just beneficial for those in leadership roles. If our leaders do a better job, they actually help everybody's professional development and working life. We've had a number of programs that are already, in addition to creating new programs, actually a couple of programs that are already doing well and have a lot of really positive feedback, and I've listed some of them there. Let's have a look at whether we could put a bit more resource in there, and for those programs that have waiting lists or lots of people who are interested in doing them, expand the number. And then some special funds that are going to be set aside for professional development for long-term casual and sessional staff. Often at the moment, casual and sessional staff don't have access to any of the ordinary professional development funds across the university. So we'd like to set up a special fund that might allow people to undertake some further training, go to a conference, get a paper finished, whatever it might be. Recruitment and selection. So again, we did really very badly around this. Some of the concerns here were about process and how long things took and how difficult they were, and some were about the substance. Do we actually recruit the right people? So we're at the moment in the procurement process for a new system that will be in place in the first half of next year. If, with any luck, in the first quarter of next year, then it'll probably take another quarter to get everybody sort of trained and familiar with using it. The intention is that's a much better design system to deal with sort of high volume, relatively simple things and to automate larger parts of the process. The hope, the plan, one never knows with a new system, but this is what it should deliver, is taking out some of that busy work and allowing us to focus more of the time and attention more quickly on being able to move people through the recruitment process. The talent acquisition pool's got some positive feedback for professional staff, and they can also speed up the opportunity for people to be hired, both internal people to put their hand up for an interest in roles and external people to be pre-vetted. So that's another area that we'll continue to work on. Part of the feedback, and we've worked on this and we definitely are getting better at this, but to make sure that for teaching and research roles for academic staff that are in schools, that there is a real representation of research and that is taken seriously. And ideally, particularly for more junior positions where people might need to establish their career, that there's some representation of the school, for example, for research centres or research focused roles. So there might be opportunities around teaching and so forth that will set that person up better for the longer term career. And again, include more training around high level recruitment in leadership development courses. Make sure that those who are doing the hiring are better trained in doing that. And finally, the chestnut that I've been trying to crack in the 3 years since I've been here, and I have to admit has not been as successful as I would have liked it to be, which is the problem with processes. And some of this is because as quickly as we managed to get some processes offline, the federal government's been coming up with new processes for new and different things, and that's been difficult. But we know we need to do better. So we're going to have a small team working on specifically a centre of expertise in process improvement. They'll be taking on particular areas of process themselves and working through and trying to improve those. But they're also will be willing to work with and train up groups elsewhere who might be wanting to look at their own processes and improve those processes too. And we're going to have a big push looking at services. How can we automate, make more simple, more intuitive? Again, the sort of the busy work, we do lots of things. Students and staff do it a lot. They're simple and easy to automate. That's going to be a long-term process. That will take a couple of years, but we'll certainly get to work on that next year or continue work because things have been done. We're going to make sure that process improvements embedded in the digital master plan, in the LMS, in the CMS, really as we get into these big systems, trying to make sure they're set up for process improvement. and we're going to continue to work together on delegations and policy simplification. That is an area where we have seen quite a lot of improvement over the last 12 months, but still plenty of work to do. So let me steam on to COVID-19 vaccine requirements. And as I said earlier, we are focusing on health and safety, not because we did badly on it in the survey, but because it's so absolutely critical. Nothing else matters if we don't look after the health and safety of our staff and students. So some of you will have seen an email that I sent out this morning, and it is a follow-up to the consultation that we started a bit over a month ago when we sent out a survey to staff and we sent out another survey to students asking about their own vaccination status and asking whether they would be supportive of a mandate for COVID-19 for staff and students. We got a clear yes back in terms of a mandate from both staff and students. I will say we only got a very small return rate from the students. I'm really not sure how much to read into that. Staff overwhelmingly were in the process of becoming vaccinated, over 90%. Students were at a lower rate, it has to be said, but again, 3.5% of them, so not sure how much to lead into that. Since that time, there's some things which have stayed the same. The first is that duty of care to ensure the health and safety of staff and students. There will be COVID in the community next year. There will be more COVID in Queensland than we've had for the last 2 years. There will be more people in hospitals. There will be more people dying from COVID. We just need to face that fact. Premier said it, Chief Health Officer has said it, Doherty Institute said it. You know, this is just clearly going to happen. So we need to be ready as an institution, and we need to be ready now rather than waiting till it happens and people are in a panic. We cannot eliminate the risk of COVID. That is not possible. Even if everybody was vaccinated, every single person in every community right throughout Australia, we couldn't eliminate it, but we can reduce the risk considerably. Another thing that's happened since the survey is we've started to see a real patchwork of regulations, and those regulations have quite a lot of impact on Griffith. So they're sort of twofold. Some of them are around people. So for a lot of our health staff and a lot of our students, there's now a public health directive that requires them, if they're going to do their job or go on their placements and so forth, to be vaccinated into hospitals, aged care, other health services, our own clinics. But that's starting to expand out. There are sort of more and more classes of people who fall in there, including some people, if you're involved in a public performance, for example. But there are also an increasing number of places on our campus where you have to be fully vaccinated. So cafes, restaurants, but our health clinics, the areas surrounding our health clinics now, even the tea rooms and the corridors and so forth. Our theatres, when they're in use for performance, but not when they're in use for teaching. So it's starting to get pretty complicated and also uneven in terms of who we're required to be vaccinated and when and in what circumstances. So that is an additional level of complication since the survey came out. So what we've done to date is, as I said, invited students and staff to take part in a survey. We've now, as of this morning, drafted a draft policy and a procedure. The procedure is only about staff. We'll be working on the procedure about students, a few extra complexities there. Under the enterprise agreements, we're now asking you for feedback to that policy and to those procedures. So we've already received hundreds of responses, so thank you. And I should say we're happy to have feedback saying you just think we shouldn't be doing any of this. To have feedback to say you're sort of broadly supportive of doing this, but we need to think about these things or do it in a different way or whatever it might be. That's always very useful. If you do also think it's a good idea, feel free to say that too. Sometimes people, only put their results in if they're opposed to something or want to change something, but we're actually trying to get a sense of sort of broadly whether people think this is good across the university. We have, of course, sought legal advice to ensure that any approach complies with all our obligations, both our employee obligations in industrial terms, but also our health and safety obligations. We've consulted with the unions and the consultative committees. We've consulted with our Health and Safety Committee and we've consulted with our council about the direction that they might be prepared to endorse. So this is now the opportunity for all staff to have some say and really happy to hear from and interested in what you have to say. Now, just to anticipate one question, Lots of people come onto our campus who are not staff and students. We are working on those. We need to give staff and students as much notice as possible about this. The plan is that this policy would come into effect 2 weeks before I Week, and so we want to give people enough time to think about it, talk to their GPs, do what they need to do, and then comply, particularly given the 2 vaccines take a bit of time. We will be working on contractors, third parties. We're probably not going to be able to hit everybody who comes onto campus. There are people who just cut through the campus on their way to work or school. There are people who come into our health clinics who are public health patients, and there might be some legal problems with denying them access to a public health facility. So we just need to do some more work on that, but we're aware of the issue, so that you know. So put that to one side. What would be required under the policy? All staff and students would be required to show proof of vaccination in order to be able to attend our campuses, sites, facilities, placements and so forth. And they'd have to do that by 2 weeks before I Week, which is when the campuses would get most crowded again. There will be a system, and we're trying to set up that system to protect privacy as much as possible, so you don't have to show this certification to lots of people. You can just enter it into a system and have a fairly automatic system, we hope. We recognise that staff may not be prepared to be vaccinated and they have a right not to be vaccinated. And we're also aware that staff have a legal right not to share their vaccination status with us. So we want to try and respect that and find ways around it. In those circumstances, we will ask those staff who either tell us that they're not vaccinated and don't intend to be, or those staff who don't share their vaccination status with us, to agree to a program of regular testing. How regular will depend on how much infection there is in the community at a given point in time. And if they agree to participate in that regime and accept that there might be some additional burdens over time, and some of those might be government, if there's an outbreak, they might be required for close contact quarantine for 2 weeks, and others it might be 1 week or whatever. But if they sign up to that, we're happy to continue. If they don't, if people say, I'm not going to be vaccinated, I'm not going to sign up to a program of testing, we will give them an opportunity to make a case to say that we can, there are other ways of protecting people's health and safety, and my circumstances are exceptional. And there will be a small COVID committee that will have a look at those from across the university, so they'll all come to the same committee so that we've got an evenness of approach. But we're trying to respect as much as possible the choices people might make, while recognising the choices that some individuals make have implications for others. Those who are not vaccinated are not just more likely to get sick themselves, more likely to be hospitalised and more likely to die. All of those things are true. They're also much more likely to infect others. Someone who's vaccinated can infect others, but someone who's unvaccinated is much more likely to infect others. And you might see seen some of the pieces in the conversation in the last few weeks that look to quantify that. So we invite you now to provide feedback on the policy by 12 p.m. Next, the 2nd of December, next week. We've got a little bit longer for the procedure, which is a bit more detailed. We can have another week on that. And the council will look at this matter in December and make a final decision. We will inform you as soon as possible after that decision is made, so that people have time to make their own decisions. And very quickly, lots of complex and weighty things there. I did just want to say we've had to deal with lots of serious, difficult, complex issues. I want to thank you all for the generally constructive and thoughtful way in which you've engaged with those through these processes and many other processes throughout the university. I've really valued it. As a university, we've benefited from it. And I do want to remind us that in all the difficulties and all of the challenges, we've really done well as an institution over the last 12 months. We've been placed in the top 300 in every major global university ranking. In fact, we were 201st in the US rankings, which was less than 0.5% that we were behind. So we might have almost crept into the top 200 on one. We've got future fellowships and DECRAs at a really high level for a university of our size and standing. Just some fantastic projects. Major grants, major philanthropic support, major industry contracts. Our staff and students, our alumni have just been recognised in so many different ways, everything from the Premier's Literary Awards through to science awards. Just fantastic. I can't even begin to say them all. And we have done incredibly well, particularly on our carbon. Some of that has been imposed from the outside. It has to be said, our flight carbon has just gone downhill, and not because we've been particularly virtuous, but it might have taught us ways to work that don't require us to fly as life comes back to normal. But we've also made a really big set of changes around baseload, and we've got a lot of exciting things coming on around the electricity that we use with solar panels, and taking more of our electricity from a wind farm next year, which is going to be great. And we were awesome at the Tokyo Olympics and Paralympics, outperforming every university in the country by a long way, and in fact being in the top 10 universities in the world for the performance of our staff, students and alumni. So, I don't say that to cover up the difficulties, the fatigue that we're all feeling, the challenges that we're going to face, but it is really important to remind ourselves so many good people doing such amazing things here. Feel privileged every day to be seeing those. So I wanted to finish on that note. Well, we'll finish with the questions. So, but just in terms of the presentation, just wanted to finish by reminding all of you how really well Griffith is doing. And if we can do well in these circumstances, we're going to do absolutely brilliantly as we start to work our way through these circumstances in however long it takes. As I say, this is our last town hall for 2021, barring emergencies, which one wouldn't like to necessarily rule out, given the year that we've had. Thank you all so much for your time, for the way that you've engaged, for the work this year. I hope that you enjoy a little bit of extra holiday, and for all the concerns that have been raised, I know for many of you a little bit of extra money to help make that holiday and end of year period a bit easier than usual. I thank you so much for all your work this year. It's been deeply appreciated, and I'll stay in contact between now and Christmas, but it's the last time face to face for many of you. Thank you again, and look forward to continuing these town halls in 2022.